Welcome back to the Colors of Parenthood. In today's episode, we have a remarkable guest, Laurel, who brings decades of experience in women's health, particularly focusing on pregnancy, postpartum care, and menopause. Join us as she opens up about her journey into motherhood, the challenges she faced, and her mission to empower women at every stage of life. Hello, everyone. This is the Colors of Parenthood, and we have Laurel with us today. Could you start by sharing a bit about yourself?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here this morning. I am a perinatal support professional and a integrative nutrition health coach and a menopause health coach. And I've been working in this field for about 30 years and absolutely love what I've done for, I don't know, for the past 3 decades. I love working with families.
Amazing. And now for the spicy part, could you share a bit your own journey into becoming a mom?
Yeah, sure. I found out that I was having my first child when my husband and I were moving to Guam with the military. And so I was very isolated and didn't really know many people. And so it was a bit of a scary time to go into a pregnancy and in isolation. But I was planning a home birth and I was really excited about the process of doing everything naturally. And the way that everything kind of unfolded was he wound up being in a breech position. And even though we tried all the things, including a version, my son was in a position that he just did not want to move from. And I wound up having a forced cesarean. Even though he managed to turn himself head down the night before the planned cesarean, I was forced to continue to have a cesarean. And that experience, along with my pregnancy and VBAC with my next son, which was actually even a bit more traumatic than my first birthing experience, was really led me into the decision to become an advocate for families. And so from that early time on, I focused on being a doula. I was a childbirth educator for many years and a prenatal yoga teacher. And my main goal was listening to families and finding out what it was that they want, so that they could share um, share what their vision was and really see their vision manifest. And over the years, I became very intrigued with the science of milk and became, I think, most fascinated in how milk changes our epigenome, which is how our genes respond to the environment and turn on and off, and also the microbiome. So over the past, I would say 10 years, that's been really my area of inquiry, is what's happening in the microbiome. How does our long-term health change as a result of our microbiome and our epigenome? And as I've moved into my own perimenopause and menopause experience, I've been learning and training on how hormones and the environment really shifts and changes that for individuals as well.
Hmm. Well, that's a lot of work, a lot of like I would say a lot of interest, but also there is one main interest here, which is
Mhm.
women's health.
Yes.
And so you just touched upon the topic about milk health,
Mhm.
human milk, sorry,
Mhm.
and about the microbiome. What's the thing that you would say you want to share here, like the thing that you know about how it changes longevity, or I don't know. I'm not really aware of how the human milk is helping us. So if you can
Yeah.
just share a bit.
So, one of the most amazing things about human milk is that human milk contains within it not only nutrients, but bioactive factors that literally work within the baby's body to change and communicate from cell to cell. And along with those nutrients and biofactors, it also contains both the microbes, um, that both the viruses and bacteria and archaea and all of these amazing microbes that are transferred from the lactating parent to the baby, but it also contains the foods that these bacteria will need to feed on once they are transplanted into the baby's gut. And Those foods are called HMOs, or human milk oligosaccharides. And we didn't know what they were for a really, really long time. We actually thought that they were um, we thought that they were there for the baby. And one of the interesting things about HMOs is that babies really can't, their bodies don't digest them, they don't utilize them. And so we thought, why does the parental body spend all of this time manufacturing these special sugars? And it turns out those special sugars aren't to feed the baby, they're to feed the bacteria, because what we now know is that how the gut bacteria in the baby's body forms and the health of that bacteria in the first days and weeks of that baby's life really changes the pathway towards both short-term and long-term health for that child. The bacteria that create communities in the baby's gut are there for the rest of their lives, unless there are specific illnesses or toxins or things that may occur in the child's life, but they are designed to stay with them. And there's a significant difference between the bacteria, the microbiome that is shared from parent to child um, with human milk than the microbiome that is installed in a baby's gut when they are fed alternate foods. For example, cow's milk based infant formula, or plant based infant formula. They are completely different microbiome, and it causes complete changes in that baby's health trajectory. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it, is because these microbes are instructional in not only telling our body systems certain ways to interact with the world, but also within the body, but contain the instructions for how to utilize food and how to promote um, the immune system response in our gut. And they also protect our gut. And as we now know, about 97% of our health is related to the health of our gut. So human milk is just so important to our long-term health trajectory.
Okay, that I didn't know that. But another question that pops up now. So, are you saying that alternative milks, a milk is okay, but does not have this microbiome that is for a long-term health? For
So I wouldn't even want to embrace the word okay, right? So
okay.
alternate milks, anything that is not human milk. So every milk that a mammal makes is species specific. It is uniquely designed to nourish that specific mammal. It's uniquely designed to protect that baby's immune system, and it's uniquely designed to cue that baby's growth and development over time. And that is very, very true of humans. In fact, we have a very complex milk when it comes to the development of our immune system, our microbiome, and the development of our brain. We have a very unique brain. So when you take the milk from another species, for example, a cow's milk, and you manufacture it and you change it, you turn it into an ultra processed food, just like any other processed food, you are removing a lot of the goodness from it that was designed to go to a baby cow. But not only that, is you are now providing the instructions that were meant for a baby cow into a baby human. And so our trajectory of growth and development are altered, as is our immune system. Not only that, the human cells don't necessarily know how to read the ingredients from cow's milk, and they certainly don't interact well with the bacteria that is shared. So the microbiome that ultimately forms in a baby's gut with infant formula is primarily pathogenic in nature, and it sets us up for a lifetime of potential ill health. So while it is absolutely fine in terms of your basic macronutrients, it does not contain the biofactors or the microbes that are necessary for thriving as a human being. And in fact, it can contribute to disease.
Mhm. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But I was wondering then, what are the main misconceptions about breastfeeding that you know of?
In relation to like between breastfeeding and infant formula feeding, or just breastfeeding in general? How do you want me to answer
Yeah,
that?
it's a big topic
Yeah.
to think about. It's a huge topic because I've spoken to a lot of moms, and there are those two sides of like also mental health and breastfeeding. So
Mm-hmm.
at first I would ask you just like breastfeeding misconceptions as it is, like breastfeeding.
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of breastfeeding and mental health, I think some of the biggest misconceptions are that you can't continue to lactate or breastfeed your baby if you do have any form of mental health challenge, right? And I think a lot of that information comes from the idea that oftentimes when a parent is dealing with a whole host of postpartum mood and anxiety disorders, they may be taking supportive medication,
Yeah.
and they may fear that those medications may impact their child's development. The reality is that by far and large, most of the medications that we use to help support a parent who is having challenges with mental health are safe for breastfeeding. And so that's a big misconception, is
It
that
is.
I would really encourage any parent who is breastfeeding their child and needs some support, some medication support, to talk to their pharmacist, not just their doctor, because often the pharmacist knows much more about contraindications and the safety of using that medication with lactation than the doctor might, because that's the job of the pharmacist, to know contraindications. And they can also help to communicate between the parent um, and the doctor, as well as, of course, I always believe in bringing in a lactation consultant and IBCLC because they have a lot of wisdom when it comes to lactation, um, to kind of help that parent and their doctor find a solution, a medication solution that will work best for that parent while they continue to feed their baby. So that would be one of the big misconceptions. The other thing that we do know is merely the act of lactating, the mere act of breastfeeding a child, it literally changes the epigenome of the parent's brain. We see more than 700 different genes activated just by lactating. And many of those genes are designed to activate behaviors that are designed for positive maternal behaviors. So it changes the way we think, it changes the way we respond to our children just by breastfeeding. And some of those changes are designed to protect us against certain forms of postpartum mood and anxiety disorders. So breastfeeding can be extraordinarily protective, particularly if the parent has a history of depression or anxiety or other, anxiety and depression challenges. Breastfeeding can be protective for them.
Okay. And so what about what are the main reasons why moms cannot breastfeed?
So I would say that, so the decision to, in terms of how you feed a child, is very, very complex. It is cultural. It has a lot to do with your family support and your family relation. Um, and surprisingly, it has less and less to do with your biology. Okay. So
Okay.
the number of lactating individuals who have, um, who actually physiologically cannot lactate is less than 5%. And that generally is due to hormonal development that can be identified during adolescence and pregnancy. So we would likely, if they were working with a lactation consultant, would have identified some risk factors along those lines. But there can also be a whole host of other hormonal challenges that may be related to not being able to make milk.
Yeah.
And on the baby side, though, it's a little higher. We are looking at a significantly larger challenge, because there's a whole host of genetic disorders that a baby can be born with, which causes challenges for them to feed effectively. They still can receive human milk, but it may be a little bit more challenging for them to do it directly at the mammary gland, right, at the breast. And then we can see a whole host of challenges with the baby's oral structure. For example, certain ties, tongue ties, lip ties, cheek ties, oral ties in general, that can cause challenges for them to move milk effectively. All of those things, we have tools, as lactation consultants and speech language pathologists and occupational therapists. There are ways to work with these things, but it can be challenging. And then there are a very, very, very small number of babies, 1 in 60,000, that are born truly lactose intolerant. And so they cannot digest lactose and will have to be on a specialized formula. So when we think about the number of couplets, parent baby couplets, who cannot breastfeed, the number is actually relatively small. But when you think of the number of couplets that have cultural challenges, work challenges, support challenges, that number is growing, 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 which may be a deterrent to them actually being successful in their goals.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people here are, like, want to breastfeed, but can't. But I'm not sure why. That's why I asked. Because my guess here is that because I know that when you're anxious and when you're experiencing a lot of anxiety or any type of mood disorders, so you're gonna answer me here. But the hormones are changing also, and because of the anxiety and everything, so it may stop you from breastfeeding.
Right. So again, that is very much so. There's a difference between the ability to
Yeah, yeah,
lactate
of
and feed a
course.
baby and um, the desire to do it. And I'm not saying desires and you want to feed your baby or not, but really kind of like the physiologic desire to feed. Because for some people who are experiencing very, very high levels of anxiety or severe depression, may actually fear that they may harm their child, or they may just be dealing with oppressive amounts of anxiety that inhibits their ability to feed effectively or to feed on a regular time schedule. And so those things can really impede and impact successful the successful relationship between the parent and child. And so, but those are very different than the physiology
Yeah, of
of
course.
lactation. And in those cases, absolutely we would recommend that they work with a peer counselor, like someone from the Leche League, with a mental health a support provider, and a lactation consultant if possible, if they want to continue to feed their baby. And for some parents, the option for them is they prefer to express their milk
Yeah.
and provide their express milk in a bottle as opposed to directly breastfeeding. And so that's the other thing that I think it's really important to share with families, is that there actually is a wide variety of options. So it's like this whole rainbow of options for families. We tend to only think that there's two options. There's you lactate completely successfully and you breastfeed your baby right on the breast, or you don't do it at all. But the reality is there's all of these options in between. There might be you express milk and you feed your milk to your baby in a bottle or cup or some other feeding device. It might be that, maybe you're not making a lot of milk, but you feed your baby with a supplemental device that has infant formula or donated milk from another parent. You know, there's just a whole host of options. And I think, unfortunately, oftentimes when they're working with a medical provider that is not keenly aware of how to support lactation, they're only given the two options. You do this or you don't do it at all, right? Um, so I just want parents to be open to, there may be more solutions that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I thank you for sharing this, because I would say specifically, as we said, culture based things are really different.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I don't think people know about options, but also, as you said, medical professionals definitely don't give a lot of options, and I think the push when you become a mom and you are still recovering and the midwife is a bit more pushy, like you need to breastfeed it and just get over it even though you don't feel comfortable, maybe
Mm-hmm.
this initial push would also affect your desire, or your belief that you can do it if you start being afraid from the beginning. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's really important what context and the situation that you give birth is about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another piece of it is I'm not familiar with how much skin to skin is promoted in your culture. but skin to skin can be a very healing tool for parents. And even it can be a bridge between the lack of breastfeeding directly and the movement towards breastfeeding. Where if a parent does not feel, has too much anxiety, or does not want to place the baby directly at the breast, but still wants to feed their baby their milk, one great option is to place their baby skin to skin when they're doing expression or using a pump or anything like that, because that still elevates their hormones. It still makes them feel bonded. And sometimes that baby just goes, I'm just going to crawl over here and do my own thing, even if you're not actively feeding me. So there can be this lovely little bridge between
Yeah.
there that can sometimes be a solution for families. But again, if we're talking about mental health challenges, there are some parents that even feel skin to skin may actually feel uncomfortable or painful for them, depending on what is going on with
Mhm.
with their mental health.
Exactly, and that's why it's such a complex topic.
Mhm.
Breastfeeding and overall any type of like things that are new to you when you become a parent, because also everyone has an opinion, and when everyone has an opinion, you start thinking, "Am I doing the right thing?" But as
Right,
you just said, it's always individualized on your own context of what's happened to you before. Are you comfortable? Are you not? Are you pushing yourself? Because this will affect
right,
everything in
right.
the beginning.
And that's another reason why I also like to make sure during the prenatal period that I'm educating families about the option of donor human milk. That, if something happens, if
Yeah.
your baby's in the neonatal intensive care unit for a long period of time and for some reason your milk supply isn't as high as you wish it was, or if there's something that's going on with you physiologically, or if there are significant mental health challenges, and if any of these things happen and you still want to provide human milk, there is always the option of donor human milk. There are donor milk banks where you can get human milk, but there is also donor to donor. There's a wonderful organization called Human Milk for Human Babies that connects parents who may have an overabundance of milk with parents who need milk. And the parents can do their own self screening. There's a whole tool to do risk assessment for each couplet, each family that's donating milk. But they're, again, like, see, these are the options. You typically only think it's a baby at the breast with their parent or no breastfeeding, but donor human milk from a bank or parent to parent is another one of those options.
Amazing. I would love to, I'll put it in the bio of this podcast episode because I would love to share what you just said, that there's a lot of options
Mm-hmm.
and to share a link. Now, I would love to go to the other topic that I'm really curious about, which is
Mm-hmm.
perimenopause. Um, can you share? Because when we talked initially, you said like people have symptoms thinking that is postpartum depression or
Mm-hmm.
something like that when it's not. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, so this is the interesting thing. So what's happening during perimenopause, which for some individuals can happen as early as age 32, which is prime childbearing years. Right? A lot of people are
Yeah.
still are having their first child, or other children at this age. The average age of perimenopause starts around 42. But what is happening at this point is the ovaries just are starting to decline in function. Your body is reducing its overall production of estrogen and progesterone. Now, when you think about what's happening in the postpartum period, in order to support the making of milk, the postpartum body reduces its amount of estrogen significantly. It drops incredibly. And so when you're comparing what's happening in perimenopause, which is starts with that drop in estrogen, those symptoms are very, very similar. We've got exhaustion, we have brain fog, we have loss of hair, right? Have um, we have the inability to sleep through the night, insomnia. We have the aching of joints, the aching of bones. So these are all very common symptoms where you might just think, oh, this is just the exhaustion and the postpartumness, which is, if you are of a certain age, you may be experiencing postpartum symptoms for sure, but you may also be in early perimenopause. And why that's important is it can affect your trajectory to feed your baby as well. So there are things to consider that we're only now just identifying, because we're only right now, I would say in the last few years, starting to place focus on the importance of menopause and how it really changes our health and what we can do about it.
Yeah, I'd say it's only around now that we focus on a lot of things that's happening in women
Hmm.
body, as hormonal changes and everything, because it's so complex and it
Yes.
hasn't been researched back then. So I think a lot of things are, yeah, we have this revelations of what's happening. And how long is the perimenopause period usually?
So it can last as long as 10 years, the process of moving from perimenopause to menopause. The average length of time is about 5 years. The definition of menopause, so when you've moved through perimenopause and you're in menopause, which I hate this definition, but the definition is that you have not had a menstrual cycle in 1 year.
Yeah.
Why I dislike this definition is because during that later phase of perimenopause, most women are having completely irregular cycles, or they may be on birth control or hormone replacement therapy or even menopause hormone therapy, or they may have a IUD or an IUC, which prevents them from bleeding.
Yeah.
So they may not even know when they enter into that stage of menopause. So I think it's a terrible definition of when we actually hit menopause. But the journey is typically 5 to 10 years. Now, I will tell you that for individuals who have significant trauma or who have chronic stress in their lives. Um, and also in the United States, the data shows that for Black Americans and Hispanic women, that they tend to experience the perimenopausal state and more impactful, more disturbing symptoms for a longer period of time. So stress absolutely and significantly impacts how we experience perimenopause and how long we experience it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And following what we were talking before, what is the difference? How can we know that we're not in the postpartum period and we're just experiencing those symptoms and we're in the perimenopause period?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, one of the things that can be done is hormone testing. So, there's a variety of different hormone tests. We would recommend, so if they're having these issues and experiencing challenges with lactation, then we might suggest doing a full hormone panel. So we're going to want to know what their estrogen levels are. We're going to want to know their progesterone levels. We're going to want to look at their prolactin levels, though that doesn't have a whole lot to do with perimenopause, but it may tell us this is more related to postpartum than to
Okay.
perimenopause. We also want to check their thyroid. Okay. So that can be blood tests. Some of those can be done with urine tests. There's a newer test that's called the Dutch test, which is a dried urine test that can look at not only the different levels of hormones, but the pathways and where they're being blocked. So that's an extraordinarily helpful test. But that would be really the first thing to do is get some hormone panels and look at what information that is providing us.
Hmm. Thank you. And so, how can we help women who are experiencing this? What sort of care would you say that is best for women experiencing perimenopause?
Mm-hmm. Um, I know this sounds really, it sounds so simplified. But one of the baseline things to help them is to first address their sleep, because one of the first things to get disturbed when we see that drop in estrogen, and it's also a significant complicator for postpartum, is lack of sleep. So addressing their sleep issues. So these can be things like figuring out whether they have a backwards cortisol response. The way we want our bodies to work is that we wake up in the morning and we have really high cortisol. And we can encourage that by the first thing we do within 10 to 15 minutes of waking is put our eyeballs on the sun. Like, not directly look at the sun, but get outside and get sunshine on your face so that your eyes are taking in natural sunlight. And you want to do that for 5 to 10 minutes in the morning if it's sunny, and at least 15 to 20 minutes if it is very overcast and cloudy. Or if it's always overcast and cloudy where you are, you can get things like, sad lights, or sometimes they're called happy lights that can help get light on your face. There's that. Okay. And then you want to see a downward progression of cortisol. So you want your cortisol to slowly drop, 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 drop until just before nighttime it's at its lowest rate. And that triggers melatonin, which is the cue to your body to sleep. And then that rises. And then throughout the night, around midnight or the midpoint of your sleep, you're going to start to see cortisol rising again. So you want your cortisol to kind of look like it's high, then it's low towards the end of the day, and then at night starts to rise up like that. But what we see for a lot of women in perimenopause is it's exactly the opposite. They wake up and their cortisol levels are low, and they start to rise throughout the day because they are stressed. And the more stress they have, the higher their cortisol levels are. So by nighttime, their cortisol levels are high, high, high. And so they can't fall asleep. They often wake up between 1 and 3 in the morning with worry, 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 worry. And their cortisol levels then crash after that. And they wake up exhausted with no energy. So, and what happens when those things are going on, when we get that difference in cortisol levels, is it impacts our liver function. It impacts our body's ability to make hormones because it causes something called pregnenolone steal. So essentially, our body takes the master hormone, pregnenolone, and instead of allowing it to go through the pathways to make all the hormones our body needs, it diverts pregnenolone to make cortisol. So we don't get the natural production of hormones because we don't have the ingredients to make it because we're constantly making cortisol. So sleep is key. So if there's I mean, I could go on literally for hours about all the things we would want to do with these families, but the baseline is address their sleep and address their cortisol levels.
Okay, and you said simplified, but that makes a lot of sense, and it's not really simple when we put it in like that. I'm curious, do people actually know what are the symptoms of perimenopause usually? Are they educated? I mean, because from my side, I just haven't spoken with a lot of people about this, so I'm just curious. Is there any education on that? I know that my mom doesn't know, so I know that here probably people don't speak about it as well.
Right. I don't think a lot of people are told what the symptoms are or even recognize that there is a period that occurs before menopause. And that stage of perimenopause and how we deal with it, how our bodies respond to it, and how we care for us is going to set the stage for whether we have very poor health in our postmenopausal years or whether we enter it with a lot of vigor and vim and health, right? So those years are critically important to set us up to reduce our risk of having like Alzheimer's and other dementia, of to reduce our risk of having a heart attack, which is the number one killer of women. We think it's breast cancer. It's not. What kills most women in postmenopause is cardiac disease. And our estrogen levels significantly matter to the health of our heart. So, what we're doing in perimenopause really matters to our reduction in our risk of cardiac function later on. So do they know? No, I can tell you, I had no idea. I started perimenopause at around 36, 37, and I had no idea I was in perimenopause. I thought I was having thyroid issues. That's what my doctor thought. Perimenopause was never even discussed. So I think it's pretty critical for women to get educated on this. I offer so many different types of free webinars. I offer classes. I have all sorts of resources for individuals who want to learn about what's going on with their body. And I'll make sure that you have some of those links. But there's also a wide variety of amazing books, which I do have those resources available on my website as well. So if they just want to read about it, there's just a tremendous amount of wealth that is now being uncovered and shared, a lot of it digitally, which is fabulous. So
Yeah.
educate yourself so you can not only live for a long time, but be healthy while you live for a long time.
Yeah, I actually am shocked because I don't think anyone knows here, or like well, speaking from a point of view of a 25-year-old, I wouldn't know when I'm 35 or 40 for that matter. I don't think my mom knows. I don't think my grandmas or like, and I think it's normal. Well, I live in a really different culture, but women's health is not something that is talked about, like the different phases of women,
Mm-hmm.
the life stage of like different phases, like menstruation, issues with hormones there, like getting pregnant, post pregnancy, and everything. It's such
Yeah.
a variety of topics. And I just realized, like, I think it will be so amazing, people, if women are educated, probably they would not be anxious that much about every symptom that they have, because we have a lot of symptoms
We,
happening all over our life with those hormones changes.
yes. Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is then if you recognize what the symptoms are, one of the things that I like to share with women is that our hormones, often we have this fear of them and we're like, oh no, hormonal things. But hormones are just communicators. They're simply whispering in our ears at all the time, this is what's happening to you right now. Please pay attention to me. And so all symptoms are of perimenopause is your body using hormones to say, this is happening to you right now. Please pay attention to your liver health. This is happening to you right now. Please pay attention to what's going on in your vascular system with your heart. So, like you may get palpitations. What's that a sign of? A drop in estrogen. Okay. Maybe we should be considering some lifestyle changes. Maybe we should be considering menopause hormone therapy. For a lot of women in their 30s, some of the first things they start to experience is estrogen dominance, which one of the first signs of that is flooding, where they just have incredibly heavy periods for days on end. And that is a true sign of estrogen dominance. And that often sounds strange, estrogen dominance, when you're having dropping estrogen. But all that means is that the amount of estrogen that you have is higher in relation to the amount of progesterone you have. They're both dropping during perimenopause. But what happens for a lot of women is as they drop, progesterone drops faster. So you're still estrogen dominant, even though you don't have a lot of estrogen on board. And it can cause the lack of sleep, the flooding, the periods that, sometimes they don't happen for 2 to 3 months. And then there you have a period for 10 days, heavy, heavy period. So these are all early signs that start to pay attention.
Okay, I'm actually a bit mad because I don't think anyone knows, like, of my friends, even that the people that are studying medicine here, because it's a really niche. Even though women's health are like 50% of the population, I don't think we are niche when it comes to like women's health, but it is perceived like that.
Right.
And um yeah, it's just a bit frustrating when I think about how like miseducated we
Mhm.
are as kids also, like when we are studying this. I don't know anything when it comes. I just started learning more and more through my work, like
Mhm.
studying, and because I'm really curious to know about mental health and hormonal changes and how this is affecting your mental health, because being aware for me is the first step to be better.
Yeah.
So just education, as you said, like, I think this will be a game changer for a lot of women.
Well, and I think it's really important. And I want to thank you so much for having a podcast and talking about these issues because that's the way we change things. The reason why women's health has not been in the news, why it has not been studied, is very complicated and very intertwined with patriarchy. But it also has to do with there's a sense of shame about our bodies and how our bodies work. And when there's a sense of shame about it, we don't talk about it. And the way to remove shame is to simply discuss it, make it real, make it in our face. And then it doesn't seem mystified, it doesn't seem scary, and it doesn't seem shameful because there should be nothing shameful about having a period when you're a young girl. There should be nothing shameful about, you know, women having orgasm. There should be nothing shameful about women moving into perimenopause or no longer having a cycle. Like it's so strange to me to think that these things for eons have been perceived as something that we should be shamed about or feel shame of when it's simply our body functioning. And so the more that we talk about it and the more that we learn what is normal in our bodies, and again, what are those whispers from our body to take better care, the easier things are going to get for all of us. And I think that's what we really want for the next generation too. Like wouldn't it be great if the next generation of our young women are expecting to have menstruation, know what to do about it, know how to eat appropriately, know how to manage their stress and symptoms, know how to engage in sexually healthy relationships, so that this whole know how to plan effectively for a healthy birth and lactation. Like, wouldn't it be great if all these things happen? So we can have not only longevity, but healthy longevity. So,
Yeah, definitely. I think this is, now that I know this, I would be more interested. Now, when I speak to my young daughter, if I have one, it will be like, to be more prepared also with her first period, because it's a taboo topic. So it's really, as you said, really weird when you're little and something happens.
mhm,
And if nobody explains to you that it's fine, it's just really shameful and you're shamed in class and everything. It's a stressful period for a kid. But yeah, I think education is. I always think that education is number one to being aware and having this first step of getting better in any sort of context and topic.
mhm, yeah,
And
yeah.
as our time is going by, I wanted to ask you one last thing, which is, what are your next projects about? What do you want to learn more? Like, how do you see now in your professional life and your personal life? What's next?
Yeah. So, what I'm focused on right now is trying to bring in the wisdom that we know about hormonal changes and perimenopause into the lactation world. I would say I'm focused about 30% on that. The rest of my time, I'm really focusing on perimenopausal and menopausal health for women. So I'm doing many women's circles, online support. I'm offering retreats for women who are in perimenopause and menopause to not only learn but feel connected um, and discover kind of the wisdom of what that change can bring for them. So that's kind of where I am, and I think my main interests are the same that they were with lactation and human milk. I'm still fascinated by the microbiome. I'm fascinated by the hormones that support all those things, and I'm fascinated by the epigenome. So really, my lens of how I look at it is similar, but I'm just looking at a different life cycle, I guess
Hmm.
now. Hmm.
Um, Thank you so much. I just had like a thing that I just wanted to say. I think it's so empowering, even though I don't like that much that word empowering because it's a bit vague. But I think empowering women, it's exactly knowing about your body and not feeling ashamed. I just thought of it because I felt like when I stopped being feeling ashamed, it was more like I just felt empowered that I know what's going on and I feel okay with it. So
Hmm.
it's amazing working in this field.
Yes, it really is. It's a showing up and also a letting go at the same time, and it feels very good when we step into that space. And you're definitely moving into a very brave space. So I want to thank you for providing this service to everyone.
Thank you so much, Laurel. It was amazing listening to you and learning so much. So I hope our audience also learn a lot. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you.